You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue, and you're listening to another episode of Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. This is episode number 413, and our guest is one of you guys. He's a listener who clicked on the register as a guest button on the hikingradionetwork.com website. Once you do this, you're taken to a page that allows you to fill out as much information as you like, and I get the result. I then reach out to you and Bob's your uncle, which is a very British expression, by the way, and you're on the show. Well, today's main guest, Daniel Clark, who is a fellow Brit, clicked that button and frankly provided me with a fire hose of information and stories I could use to interview him. Daniel hiked the AT last year and, like we all do, he wanted to share some of his stories. He'll be on in a moment. Now, we were hoping to catch up with Jessica Lane Wright as our second guest today. I wanted to know how she's settling down after her epic through hike last year, which ended just before Christmas. Unfortunately, she couldn't make that work this week, but she'll be on next week. Instead, I've got a buddy of mine on the show. Andrew Cohen and I did the TSX Challenge together in 2022, and he's on today to tell you about the TGO Challenge, which is a kind of make-it-up-as-you-go-along route from coast to coast in Scotland. Andrew did it last year, so I asked him to come on the show and share his story. Andrew will be along after Daniel. Oh, and while I think about it, I was at a meeting last Monday evening at the Appalachian Trail Club of Florida. Yep, there is one. And one of our members, Scott Doing, asked club members if any of them had knowledge of the W Trail in Patagonia. I'd heard of it, but I didn't know any details myself. Scott's heading there soon, and I said I'd mention it on the show. So, if some of you know about this hike and would be willing to chat with Scott about it, just email me at steve@hikingradionetwork.com and I'll put the two of you in touch with each other. I hope that somebody can share some info with him. Let's get on then and meet Daniel Clark with the kind of unusual trail name of Lucky Colleague. Here's Daniel. Our guest today is Daniel Clark, who is a fellow Brit, and I'm afraid we won't be providing subtitles. Hey Daniel, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. Yep, no subtitles.
Yeah, absolutely none. Now, you're one of the people who clicked on the register as a guest button. I don't know whether it was in my show notes or maybe on my website. And man, you gave me a lot of information to go on.
Yeah,
it was a bit of a fire hose. So I'm going to pick out some of those points to tell your story.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
Let's start with you did the AT in 2023 in 145 days, which is pretty impressive. Where did you learn about the AT in the first place?
I mean, the actual AT as a walk probably about a decade ago, but the concept of just the Appalachian Mountains and the peoples there, some subjects just in your head when you're a kid and you see films or everything, and it's just there and it's always been there. And I've always liked walking, and it was really probably only a decade ago that I realised there was actually a walk you could do.
Yes.
And then as soon as I
amazing,
realised,
isn't it?
Yeah,
amazing when you realise that. Yeah.
As soon as I realised that, I thought, oh, okay then, right, I'm on. At the time, I got two kids. They were at that stage. They were probably at school, so I knew I couldn't do it then. It was just trying to find a time to do it, and obviously things like COVID got in the way. And but the Appalachian Trail itself, probably no more than a decade. But the concept of the mountains and everything, I just love it. That's why I like being outside.
Yeah, well, in fact, you did say that you've been an extensive hiker and backpacker, but have you been that back in the UK for many years? Have you been doing it for many years? Yeah,
I mean, as prior to getting married, I did do quite a bit of walking. When I got married, my wife and I, our honeymoon was in Iceland. Rather than sitting on a nice warm beach, we decided to go on a tent in Iceland 30 years ago. And from then on...
You're still together. And you're still together.
Yeah, I was forgiven for that one. But as a family, we've always gone on sort of rent a cottage walking holidays in the UK.
Nice.
And as the kids got older, I then would just disappear for 4 days and go do a walk. And my family just got used to me disappearing at times. And so I've done quite a few of the sort of 100-mile to 200-mile walks in the UK. And once it got into my head about the Appalachian Trail, I was thinking, okay, so I've got to find something long in the UK to do to see if I really want to do it for weeks at a time. You know, it's okay doing something for a week because in a way,
Sure.
you know that if everything gets wet and cold, it's only a couple of days and you'll be home. Whereas it's a little bit different if you've got another 4 months to go or 3 months to go or whatever.
It is. It is. You know, I'm gonna come to your incredibly long shakedown hike, which has a certain commonality with me. But when you went. When you persuaded your wife to honeymoon in Iceland, a camping holiday in Iceland, did she ever consider coming with you on this trip? Was that ever an option?
The way it works with my wife, bless her, and I agree with her 100%, is if we can guarantee that we stay in a B&B at the end of each day, she'll do any walk with me at all. And a lot of the walks in the UK, you can stay in a B&B at the end of the day and you can have baggage transfer and all sorts of things. So we do quite a lot of the walks together. When I want to camp, she just looks at me and waves and go on, do it yourself.
She's supportive, not in the supportive sense of wanting to be with you to do it.
So when we can walk together, I mean, we're doing Tour de Mont Blanc this summer, so that's staying in hotels. So or B&B places or whatever. So we do that together. But something where we've got to carry your own tent, she's not really interested in that. Which is funny because she will do it if it's on a bike. So we do sort of 4 or 5 day bike tours and we'll do it. But she just doesn't want to carry the stuff, which is fair enough. I mean, everyone's different.
Yeah, it's just funny. You know, I visited the UK last year and I hadn't visited the UK as a tourist since I'd lived here. And when I was in the UK, it travels different when you're living there, isn't it? You know, It doesn't feel like you're visiting. So UK came across beautifully, and I can imagine there are some fantastic walks in the UK as well.
There are.
Yeah,
and
so, you know, I'm excited.
For an American audience who have less holiday entitlement, there are so many good ones you can do. If you fly into London, get a train to the start, you can do 4 or 5 day walk, get a train back from the end, you're in London for another day, you can go home. So there's a lot of 100-mile walks that go through some amazing places, not only history, but, you know, countryside and hills and cliffs and, you know, all that sort of coastal stuff. And there is a big variety. I mean, okay, they're not huge mountains. I mean, you know, we count a mountain as being 3,000 foot, but
that's right.
It's so that was a bit of a surprise. But there are a lot of good walks, and a lot of them have got a lot of history attached to them.
Absolutely, and you know, you decided to come over here and do the AT, which, you know, is quite a commitment. But how did you work out the logistics that you simply need, you know, that you need to simply get over here and on the trail? So
for everybody who sort of travels around the world, you generally get a 90-day visa for a little bit of admin. If you're coming to the US, you have to fill in this ESTA form, but it's sort of name and address and that sort of stuff, and you can get in for 90 days. And
it used to be 180 days. It used to be 6 months. Wow. Yeah, interesting.
And obviously, coming the other way, you know, you come to Europe. 90 days is generally the sort of break point. So obviously, the AT or any of the long trails can take longer than that. So you have to go and get what's called a B2 visa, which is up to 6 months. It's a lot of sort of information you have to hand over about, you know, you've got a base in the UK and you're not going to remain in the US and all that sort of stuff. So I prepared all this stuff. You get an interview at the US Embassy. You go along. They ask you one question. You're like, yeah, fine. Okay, good. So clearly not much of a risk. But you do have to get, you know, a 6-month visa. And there was a German girl on the trail when I did it who came in on a 3-month visa and thought she could just leave and come back. And the one technical thing I think people don't always realise is it doesn't actually matter what visa you've got. It's up to the officer on deck when you arrive to decide whether they're allowed you to come in. So technically, you can come in on a 3-month visa, go away, and come back on a 3-month visa. But in reality, that just raises red flags to them, and they'll say no. And she was told no, and she had to go home. So,
what a drag.
which is, so I had a 6-month visa, and then, coming from a country where, not quite, but essentially healthcare is free, I then had to go and get insurance for what potentially may happen. And
You do.
Yeah. And when I first went to get a quote, I was 59. When I actually travelled, I was 60. And boy, there's a heck of a difference between those two ages in insurance terms. So, getting your visa, getting your insurance, those are the sort of two big things that I think you got to get in line before you go.
And as someone from outside the US, tell us one or two of the things that you became aware of in terms of differences for Brits or Europeans, obviously, over here.
Probably the biggest one actually is food. I know we sort of all have the same fruit and vegetables, but it's actually the process side that's very different, and also food to support, through hiking. Some of the products I can get in the US, you cannot get in the UK. I mean, just something as simple as a tuna packet doesn't exist in the UK. You have to buy tuna.
Really?
You have to buy tuna in a tin.
So,
and also, as I found out, you might be able to buy it in one particular supermarket, but four days down the road at another supermarket, it doesn't exist. So I had to sort of develop a range of things that I could eat, such that if I couldn't find everything, I could find some things. I mean, probably the biggest one, which always used to make me laugh, was honey buns. No such thing exists in the UK. Boy.
For good reason, by the way.
I can understand.
They are a heart attack waiting to happen.
You can see the fat and the calories dripping off it. So thank goodness for honey buns for being a through hiker, not for real life, but for being a through hiker. Food was a big thing. I mean, culture, not too bad. To be fair, most Americans seem to like English people, so that's quite handy. And I had,
hang on, you gave them a bit of culture, didn't you? Didn't you teach one or two?
Yeah. No, some of my family, I taught them some phrases. I had to be fair, it was two-way. I had to say things like "God bless America" a couple of times a day, but I did teach them some English phrases that they kept asking me, "Are you sure this is not rude?" And yeah, no, seriously, it's not rude. So
you were lying. You were lying, I presume.
No, I wasn't lying. No, it's not rude at all. It just sounds rude.
Dear.
But I think food was probably the biggest one. The other after that is just because of size of country. Conurbations, towns are more spread out in the US than they are in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get to a town and the Walmart is 2.5 miles away. Well, you get to a little UK town, probably the whole town is half a mile across.
Yes.
So that's a little different to get in your head.
And one thing I noticed, in fact, you do actually mention, is also the time difference, because it's surprisingly 5 hours is a surprisingly inconvenient time, isn't it?
Yes.
For certain times of day, and that's always bugged me over here.
Yes, no, it is, and one of the things over the years that I've sort of developed with the family is that if I'm out on a walk, I'm the one that makes the contact, because sometimes if you receive a message saying, "Can you call home?" my brain goes off at wrong angles all over the place. What might this be? And so you add in the 5-hour thing. What we agreed was I would try and send a WhatsApp location or a message or something to say, this is where I am each day. And then once a week, we would try and arrange a WhatsApp call, just so I could chat to somebody else. And they could, as my youngest son said to me when I sent about the third WhatsApp location, he said, "She's still in the woods then?" I wrote back and said, "Yeah, I will be for quite a while." Yeah,
quite a while. Yes, there's a few woods along the way.
Yeah.
But before you actually came over here, you did a pretty impressive shakedown hike.
Yeah,
and it's the Southwest Coast Path, which I'm going to be doing. This obviously this coming year. How was it as a shakedown?
As a shakedown, from my point of view, absolutely fantastic. My wife and I, it's funny, we were talking about this the other day. I don't think we ever sort of sat down and said, yes, you're going to do the AT and everything go on. But what we did agree was that she said to me, well, why don't you do a nice long hike to begin with to make sure you want to do it for a long time? And so
good reasoning. Yeah,
I looked through all the sort of long trails in the UK and thought, Southwest Coast Path, that should be good. That's going up and down headlands. That's up and down. That could replicate sort of bits of mountain walking. So I learned a lot about gear. I took far too many clothes. I learned quite a bit about my kit and the tent and how I stored it. And, I have a Nemo, two-piece, inner and a fly. And so I learned quite a bit about how I should store those. So pretty often in the UK, the fly does get wet. So how do you store that so it doesn't impact anything else?
Sure.
The actual 28 odd days I was there, it convinced me that actually I didn't mind doing it for that amount of time. I really enjoyed it. It was absolutely fantastic. Coastal walking, particularly the Southwest Coast Path, it's stunning. And the path, I mean, it's hundreds of years old, parts of it, because it's, the government checking on smuggling or whatever they're supposed to be doing. But it's a beautiful path, and I got a lot from it, both in terms of kit, in terms of could I physically do something. I did push myself. I mean, I was wild camping, but I did push myself to try and average more than 20 miles a day to see.
That's rich. No, I'm not doing. I won't be doing that. Yeah, there's no way. I'm doing. Not only am I not doing that, I don't want to do that, even if I could. I don't think I could anyway, to be honest with you. But I think 12, 13, 15 miles, that'd be great.
Fantastic.
Maybe 16, 17. I'm not looking to do it. And you actually told me before we actually started recording that you actually camped all the way along the way virtually, except for 1 or 2 days.
Yes.
So how easy was it to camp out there then?
Very easy. It's once you get sort of 15, 20 minutes away from a little village and you're on the coastal path, you don't really see many people.
Nice.
There are loads of places that you can pitch your tent. Some of them are just, stunning. A small piece of flat grass, 50 yards from the coast. You see the sun go down, you see it come up.
Awesome.
There are seals in the water. It's just ridiculous. I never had an issue, because people might not know, but technically you're not supposed to wild camp in the UK. You're supposed to get the permission of the landowner. Well, who the hell's the landowner on the coast?
Exactly.
And also, you're not doing any harm. Arrive late, leave early, leave no trace. Who's gonna worry? Who's gonna know?
Yeah.
And I had no problem getting them. There are some slight differences to the experience on the AT in that there's an awful lot of livestock. So there's a lot of cows, a lot of sheep. So you do have to make sure you get into a bit of the path where the cows haven't been and the sheep haven't been. You go.
Very good reason.
Very
good reason there.
Yeah, exactly. Long time ago, I did wake up once with 3 cows around my tent, and that was a bit of a surprise.
Oh dear.
Because they're just curious, but then sometimes they can just be a bit silly and stamp on things.
So you flew across here.
Yep.
And you started. What was the plan to go straight from Springer to Katahdin? Were you going to flip flop? And what was the actual plan?
My plan was simple. I'll just go north. I'm fairly simple.
Right, okay.
I just want to get from A to B.
Right.
And I didn't know enough about the US to know what a flip flop really would entail. So
fair enough. Yeah.
I thought start at the start and see how far I can get.
And when did you start? What date?
Officially the 23rd of March. I did the approach trail on the 22nd, and I camped with a couple of other people about a mile from Springer, just before Springer, on the 22nd. So on the 23rd, we then got to Springer and sort of said that's our day one, as it were.
That's exactly what I did 9 years ago.
Wow.
Exactly. 22nd of March, I did the approach trail. So
wow.
How about that? Yeah,
wow.
There you go. That was my first one. So that Southwest Coast Path, was that a good shakedown to prepare you for Georgia? Because Georgia is, the coast path looks like it's got lots of ups and downs, but there's no really extensive climbs. There's some quite extensive climbs in Georgia, aren't there?
The big difference, I would say, is the climbs in Georgia were more steady, as it were. You were going up for quite a way.
Yeah,
on the
switchbacks.
And on the Southwest Coast Path, the ups, because of the type of terrain it is, they're generally built steps, even if it's not all obvious. And you'll go up 200 steps, which that's quite tough to just go straight up 200 steps and then across a headland and then down 100 steps and then across a beach and then up the next headland. So, I did it in the May of the previous year. So actually any physical benefit I got had long gone. But the sort of...
It gave you an idea, though,
It gave me an idea of what I do. And as I said earlier, I tried to push myself to see, could my body take it? Because, I'm not a young man anymore, but... it seemed okay, and I was happy.
What do you mean? You're a kid. You're 10 years, you're 11 years younger than me. What are you talking about?
I'm a kid then.
How did you, in those early miles, how did you find them? Was it, did you get into a rhythm straight away?
Yeah, no, about 2 years before, I did follow a YouTuber. There was a chap called Camper and a husband and wife team, and I followed them. And the only bit of advice he gave early on was to take it low and slow, he said. So in the first week, 2 weeks, I don't think I did more than 8-9 miles a day. And I'm glad I did, to be honest, because...
Best way.
By the time I got sort of 10 days in, 12 days in, I was like, okay, I've got a rhythm now. I'm sort of beginning to understand. Because again, coming from the UK, the landscape's very different on the AT. I've never seen woods like it, of that size. You know, as you say...
They're not woods, they're real forests over
exactly,
here. They're
exactly.
real forests, yeah.
Obviously, starting in March, you know, there are no leaves on the trees and it's very brown and everything. But the switchbacks, some of them went on for ages. And I kept thinking, well, I was told this was going to be easier than the bits I'm going to come up to. I think, crumbs. But
they're all lying to you. And also the switchbacks give you loads and loads of false summits.
Oh,
you think you're at the top, and you turn a corner. Oh, my God, we're going up again.
When you see that light at the end of that particular switchback, and you think, is this going to be a turn right or is this actually going to be the top?
No,
and it's a turn right.
Yeah. And I'm going to go straight to that pitch email that you sent me. Let's start with a live deer birth in New Jersey. How close were you? And how did you realise what was going on?
Right. Well, in New Jersey, there's before the boardwalk section, there is quite a big nature reserve that you seem to sort of go round the outside. And
that's right. Yes, I remember.
Yes. 3 or 4 others. Who was I with? I was with Bob and Nope and Danny Boy. And it was pretty hot, and we were arguing about where we're going to stop. And they do actually have some benches along there. So we missed the first bench, and I said, no, sod it. When it gets to the next bench, I'm stopping. So we stopped at that next bench. We all sat down, and we looked back to the sort of nature reserve bit, and this deer just took off. And we're like, what's going on? And that was the dad, as it were. And Mum stood up.
Didn't want to be anywhere near.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be anywhere nearby.
Yeah, Mum stood up. And we took out, I recorded stuff on my mobile, started recording, and she gave birth.
Oh, how awesome.
And
how beautiful.
We were just sort of, it was so random, you know, and we just watched it for a bit, and we all kept looking at each other thinking, this is just surreal. Yeah, and it was, Dad came back, and they all sat down, and then the little one got up and wandered around a little bit. And
smoked a cigar,
and off he went. But it was... You know, you see these things on television of you know, farm animals giving birth or something like that, and but seeing it live was just wow. Yeah. And it was in daylight as well, which was weird.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. It must have been absolutely beautiful. And you mentioned that you were in that 6 inches of rain in 12 hours of Vermont.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard lots of weather stories this year. It was a terrible year for weather in a lot of ways. Did it get scary at any stage on the trail that time?
Yeah, it did. We that particular day, the rain started about midday, and the forest got dark. You know, the white blazes actually stood out quite a bit. So whether or not they have some sort of pigment in them, I don't know. But it just chucked it down from midday. We got to the shelter, which I think is a tourist shelter, something like that. I don't know. We got to the shelter, which has 8 people in it. It had 12 people in it. There were obviously camp spots, but the close ones were all puddles. So we pitched our tents sort of slightly further up in the leaves, thinking that would be good. It rained all night. When we got up, managed to get tent down and everything. We were standing in the shelter. It was still raining. We got onto the path. The first path we got onto, it was about 4 inches deep of running water. We kept going for another couple of hours, and then between the 3 of us, Danny Boy, Full Milk, and I, we just sort of said, "This is stupid." You know, we've come across one river which was one of those seasonal waters where it might not be running, and that was about 1.5 feet deep.
Wow!
And we're thinking we haven't even come to the proper river yet, so we decided, this is a day to get off. So we found a logging road, which then led to a normal road, and then. Really nice, and this happened time and time again. Somebody in a pickup just stopped and saw us and sort of said, "Do you want to get anywhere?" And we're like, "Well, if we can get to the road, we can probably get to a hostel." And they said, "No, we know where the hostel is." So they just dumped us in the back and drove us to the hostel. And we then
Do you know,
had
as a
day
Brit,
off.
isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? As a Brit, we don't pick up hitchhikers at all in
we
the
don't.
UK.
We don't
But
at all.
there are absolutely no problem about it
Yeah.
in the US, is there?
funny-
And that was one of my big surprises, I must admit.
Yeah, and in this particular instance, the lady apologised for the back of her pickup truck not being clean enough. And I'm thinking
Quite
we're
right
in the middle
too.
of a storm. So we then spent sort of a day and a half. That was a sort of a half day off, and then the following day we had off to let a lot of the water go. And then when we got back out, obviously it's Vermont, there's loads of mud, but when we actually got it back out, most of the river crossings were knee deep or less after that.
Right.
But there was so much water. I've never seen anything like it, to be honest.
Yeah. And you've been to Manchester.
Yeah.
So have I.
Yeah.
Now,
Rains every day.
I'm going to skip over the extensive poop stories right now
Okay, that's good.
in your note,
Yeah.
and ask you about a hiker wedding you were actually part of at my favourite AT hostel, Woods Hole.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well,
How did that come about?
it was that particular day. It was because we used to take it in turns to ring hostels, and it was my day to ring the hostel. So I rang sort of in the morning and sort of said, there's three of us. Is there any space? And they said, yes, there is. If you can get here by 4. And I was thinking, well, that's an interesting way of saying it. So pushed on, got there at 4, and as we came around the corner, it's a gravel sort of road up to Woods Hole, and then you sort of turn into the property. And there was a thing saying there was somebody's wedding going on. So I went in and said, I'm really sorry. I did ring earlier today. You said there was a room. And they said, yeah, there's a room. I was like, okay. And they said, but if you can be quick, there's a wedding. So we were the guests at the wedding. And all the two, the bride and groom, they wanted a wedding with random hikers because they were hikers and they met on the AT and they met at that particular hostel and they married a couple of years later. Really, really nice people. And so, yes, we had a wedding that day and, the evening meal. That was the other thing because on the phone she said, would you like an evening meal? And I was like, yeah, sure. If you're going to, I'll pay for an evening meal. It was actually the wedding meal and it was free. And then in the morning,
awesome.
when I spoke to the owner,
you got to love Neville. That's Neville. You got to love Neville. She's awesome.
So I spoke to her in the morning and said, okay, so I need to settle up. I had a room and we've all had breakfast and everything. And she said, no, that's all paid for. And I said, by who? She said, the wedding party. They pay for everything. And I said, well, and they were just driving out in their car going on their honeymoon. So I was running up actually, because the gravel goes up, running up the gravel to drive, sort of waving at them to tell them to stop. And when they did stop, I just sort of thanked them umpteen times and said, this is, unbelievable. Just
awesome.
And really nice couple.
Now, this also made me laugh when I read it. You did meet a couple of interesting characters out there, one of whom was a wanted felon. Yeah. You shared a shelter with them. Well, I don't know how much you can tell us. I mean, did you?
We didn't know
how
at the
wanted
time.
Was he?
We didn't know at the time he was wanted. It was coming towards the end of. Was it Pennsylvania? It's Pennsylvania and then New Jersey. I apologise for not knowing the states.
Yeah, Pennsylvania, order. Then New Jersey. That's right.
Yeah, so it was the last shelter in Pennsylvania. And on that particular day, we looked at the weather forecast and it said it was going to rain and rain and rain. And we'd walked quite a way and we got there about 2, the shelter about 2 o'clock, and it was nice and sunny. And we were thinking, but it was forecast to rain. So we decided we'd have lunch there, wait half an hour, and then the rain came. And so we stayed. And there was a guy there the whole time and he didn't look like a hiker. But he kept talking, have we got any food? Can I get you water for you? Blah, blah, and all this sort of stuff. And we were like, okay, these are weird things to ask. But anyway, but he didn't look like a hiker. So the following day, when we got into New Jersey, the hostel we went to, the church hostel, the guy there said, have you seen this person? And he described him. And I said, oh, yeah, he's in the shelter. He said, right, thank you very much. He's a wanted felon. And I said, sorry? Is it something really serious? I think it's robbery rather than anything sort of against a person.
That's fairly serious, though.
That's pretty serious. But yeah, it's one of those where you do meet somebody and your gut feeling is, this isn't right, something's not right. So in the shelter, because it was raining overnight, the shelter was full, but I was at the far end of the shelter with Full Milk, who I was with at the time, thinking, well, if anything happens, he's got to jump over 4 or 5 people to get to me. But it was
That's the spirit. That's the spirit.
Exactly. You
The
can
brave
die first.
Brit, yeah.
Exactly. But it was just things like he just didn't have the right food. He didn't have any utensils to cook his food in. He kept asking, could I borrow your gas? And it was like, hang on a sec. And he said, no, I'm a walker. And we were all like, no, you're not, mate. You're not.
Yeah.
I know I'm not from the US, but I can tell you, you're not. Hiker.
Yes, you can work that one out. Yeah, there are people who wherever you are in the world, will set off alarm bells in you, and they obviously did.
And we knew something wasn't right, but we didn't know what.
Yeah. And the gear that you had, how did that work out for you? And I asked because you apparently hiked with 3 trekking poles.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay. On the Southwest Coastal, when I started, I did it in the month of May. The first bit in North Cornwall coast, you are quite close to the cliff edge, and on the day I went through, there were actually storms and there were 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and if I was sensible, I would have stopped, but I wasn't sensible, so I kept going, and I slipped 4 or 5 times, and the last time I slipped, I put a trekking pole down, and it snapped, and if it hadn't have snapped, I probably would have fallen onto sort of 2 meters of gorse before you get to the cliff. So that left me with 1 trekking pole. Well, I eventually bought replacements, months later. So my theory was, and it's a stupid theory, my theory was I'm bound to break one on the AT. So I'll tell you what, I'll carry this one with me. So I carried it for 1,000 miles and then realised that there are loads of places I can buy them. So that didn't make it any further. But everyone kept asking me, what you got that trekking pole for? And I was like, well, in case I break one. And they all looked at me and said, well, why wouldn't you buy another one? I think, I know now. But when you're miles away, you don't know.
Now, I'm looking at the other notes here, and your trail name, Lucky Colleague, which is a strange trail name, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
It's apparently as a result of a Marvel superpower that you possess.
Exactly.
What is it?
Exactly. Apparently, it's my accent. So the Lucky Colleague comes from, I didn't realise this, but whenever I went to get a hitch, and they always made me go and get it because apparently it worked better when I sort of opened my mouth, as it were. I kept referring to people I was walking with as my colleagues. I didn't know this. And so they said, so that's where the colleague bit came from. The lucky bit came from the fact that I could get hitches so quickly. And I said to my colleagues, I was like, yeah, but I'm going up to people in a gas station, and they're stationary, so they're not going to go anywhere. So as long as it's a pickup truck and I'm polite to the person, they're going to give me a lift. And so I would get all these lifts. So they said, oh, you're called Lucky Colleague. And a lot of the time it was shortened to Lucky. But Lucky Colleague. But as I've done now, I've used the word colleague, but I didn't know I used it. So
you're right, by the way. The accent is a Marvel superpower. I would not have had a podcast for over 400 episodes had I not spoken like this.
Well, funny enough, one of our hitches that we got, I can't remember what town we were in, but we were in a coffee shop and we were at one table, 3 of us, and there were locals on another table. There were 4 of them, and they were discussing. Well, they weren't local. 2 of them were local, and 2 had come in, and they were friends, and they were discussing local place names. And I overheard them, so I sort of jumped in because some of them were similar to place names in the UK. And we had just had a game about pronouncing place names. And I said to one of the lady on the table, I said, okay, so if I can get the place name right, do I get a free lift to Walmart? And she said, yeah, if you get it right. So I deliberately got it wrong, because it sounded just like a UK one. And she said, oh, don't worry about it. You'll get a lift anyway. She said, I just like listening to your accent. So we had this game just naming. They brought out a road map and just started pointing and saying, what is that called? And I would sort of look at it and go, Biloxi. And they go, okay, that one's okay. And then point to something else. And I'd say it and they go, okay. So they just wanted me to speak. So, it has its advantages. Doesn't have any in the UK.
Exactly. I say this accent never works in the UK. It works really well over here. And you actually met somebody on your AT hike who lives fairly close to you back home in the UK, didn't
you? Yeah, it's the weirdest thing ever. So before I went on, to go to the US to do the AT, and I'm not a great user of Facebook at all. My youngest joined me to a Facebook group, fine, and I put a message out saying, is there anybody in the UK who's done the AT? And this guy answered, And then I said, well, I'm in the east of England. He said, yeah, I'm in the east of England. And I said, well, I live near Cambridge. And he said, yeah, I live near Cambridge. And I'm thinking, this is stupid. It ended up, he's sort of the village next along. And he's doing the AT in 3 bits. So this year, or 2023, he did the sort of second, third, as it were. And we met for a coffee, exchange information, blah, 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 blah. He said he wasn't going to do the AT. So I'm in Waynesborough, in a hostel in Waynesborough. And I'm chatting to the owner to find out where some things were. And he said, where was I from? I said, oh, I'm near Cambridge. He said, and I thought he said something like, oh, I've been there. But he actually said, no, there's somebody from Cambridge upstairs. And I was like, no, you misunderstand. I am from Cambridge. He goes, no, there's somebody from upstairs. So I walked upstairs and this guy was there. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, well, I was going to do this walk and I was going to do that, but I decided not to. I thought I'd come back to the US to do a bit of the AT.
Nice.
How random is that?
How random. You're actually in the same hostel in Waynesborough.
In Waynesborough, really? On the same
Absolutely
day.
Amazing.
And it was a few days after Trail Days, and he'd gone to Trail Days, and he hadn't been able to get a lift back, so he was sort of a day late. So a day later, we wouldn't have met.
That's right. Oh, yeah.
And
that happens all the time, man. I tell you, that happens all the time.
It's spooky.
So you reach Katahdin, you get there. How are you feeling? You're 60, and this is a tough trail, and a lot of people now of our age do it as well.
Yeah.
Did you stand up well physically on the trail?
I did. I was lucky because I've done so much walking. I think this is my theory anyway. I've worked out what works for me, for my feet, which is a big thing. Shoes, socks, foot care. It's a big thing. I've had boots or trail runners that have given me blisters in the past, and I've never used them again. All that sort of stuff.
Right.
So that bit sort of worked for me because I've walked a lot. I'm retired now, but the job I had was pretty stressful. So I used to go for a walk every morning for about 50 minutes. And because of that, I'm just used to walking all the time.
Yeah, sure.
So I also got myself, my one big purchase was to get a brand new pack because I knew when I did the Southwest Coastal, my pack actually cut into my shoulders and I had real problems with it. So I knew I had to get a pack that fitted me properly. So I bought an Atom pack and had it properly fitted.
Actually, that is surprisingly important. And I've said this on the show for several people. I think people should definitely be fitted for their packs.
Yeah.
And I know I've said this before, but it's worth saying again, my pack is actually a medium frame pack, and I'm a big guy.
Yeah.
And yet I had a medium frame pack, so you really need to get your pack fitted. So I'm glad you did that.
On one of the trips in the UK to a place called Lake District, which is a stunning place to walk, there is a manufacturer there called Atom, and I went in and had just because we were there, and I went in and had a fitting, and they were brilliant. So I think that helped, having a pack that fitted. I'd sorted my feet out in the previous years. I'm fairly fit, but obviously you're never fit enough until you've done sort of a month almost.
No, but it's debilitating. A 2,000-mile hike is debilitating.
Yes, I lost quite a bit of weight.
You get stronger, you get fitter, you lose weight, but it takes it out of you.
It does.
Were you... and like me, I didn't get any blisters either, by the way, on either of my AT hikes. Not one blister.
I didn't either.
But were you glad it was over when it was over, or did you think, I wish I could do another week of this?
No, I think for the last couple hundred miles, I want this to finish.
Right,
I think I'd had enough by then. Of the trail overall, about 1,400 miles. There's somebody I did walk with for first 500-600 who got injured, called Old School, and he lives in Connecticut. I can't remember where he lives, but I needed a break. I knew I needed a break, and he came along and picked me up and took me to his house for 2 days, and that meant that I could finish. Last 200 miles, yes, I knew it was coming to an end. I was sort of worrying a bit more about going downhill. I didn't want to fall.
Sure.
Last few 100 miles.
Yeah.
100-mile wilderness was just it's just fantastic. But the last bit, that last bit at the top of the Katahdin where it's fairly flat and you're just... It was eerie and it was lovely and warm, and I was just thinking, it's over. It's finished. I've done it. And when I got to the end and, you put your hand on the sign and there's that moment when it's, wow, I've actually done this.
Oh, yeah.
I've actually done this. I didn't think I could. And then you got to go back.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I reckon the downhill from Katahdin is worse than the uphill.
Yeah,
much worse.
That's a bit more challenging, I think. But I think I was ready to finish, definitely.
And now you're home.
Yeah.
How long have you been home now? How long? We're recording January 4th.
14th of August, so that's month
All
8.
right, so 4 months.
4 months.
4 months, yeah. Do you miss it?
I do, and to be honest, I've already done a 100-mile hike on the South Downs.
Good you have.
I was just I was itching, and my wife said, "Oh, just go." So I disappeared for 4 days. But I do miss it. I tell you what, I miss more than anything. Actually, are all the people, not just the people I walk with, but the people in the hostel owners, the shuttle drivers,
Absolutely.
the towns. I knew that it had that sort of community, but actually, until you get to it, you don't realise just how amazing it is. I've never experienced anything like it. And I did say to one of my American colleagues, that actually
Yes.
I realise it's attached to the trail, but everybody should be proud of how they respond to people who come and do the trail, because there was never a time when I didn't get assistance if I needed it, or people weren't friendly, or people weren't helpful, or it was unbelievable.
The AT community is something that I've never experienced in my life. You know, I've done a little bit of other hiking than the AT, but really it's just extraordinary how everybody treats you and makes... almost has an interest in your doing well. And I love that part of what Americans do. And I think it's so giving and really enjoyable. Have you got any other hiking ambitions over here at all? Or are you done with America?
I do. No. Never say never on big ones, but I don't think I'm likely to do PCT or CT. But I'm coming over for trail days, and I want to do Centennial Trail in South Dakota. I know it's the other side of the country, but because I just want to see bison in the wild, to be honest. And I realise Mount Rushmore's on it and all that sort of stuff. I'd quite like to do Superior Trail. Is it,
Superior Hiking Trail. I've got a map of it in my office. I'm looking at it right now, actually.
I'd quite like to do that. But I've got, we have so many to do in Europe, and actually the French have just created one called the Hexa Trail.
I know they have.
A couple of years.
And I had a guy, one of my guests, who came. His name's Lord Tom Boisagay, I think it is, and he was going to do a through hike this past year. I meant to reach out to him again, but I mean, I think there are so many trails to do, but I still think the Appalachian Trail. If there's one trail I could ever do the rest of my life, it would be the Appalachian Trail. So,
I agree. I agree.
Okay.
It was amazing.
Okay, man. Well, Look, I appreciate you filling in the form and coming on and sharing your story. You and I didn't have much of a conversation for me to work out the question, but you gave me so much information in the first place. I felt prepared to let that develop, and I'm glad we talked over the various things that were on that list. And
you're very kind.
And thanks very much for coming on the show. And if you go again on another big one, actually, if you got another smaller one, I'd love to have that one conversation with you about that one as well. So,
and if you want any information about Southwest Coastal, I'm here. I will certainly reach out to you for that. So take it easy, okay? Thank you. Cheers then. Cheers. Bye. Bye. 3 trekking bowls in case I break one. That is hilarious. And I think the fact that he carried all 3 for 1,000 miles talks to the fact that we all tend in some degree to pack our fears. It took him 1,000 miles to learn that he didn't need a third pole, but it was right for him until it wasn't. And by the way, that fire hose of stuff that he sent me when he applied to appear on the show, there was still one thing I'd intended to ask him about that I'd forgotten. So I pressed record again. Here's Daniel. Well, as luck would have it, another thing on Daniel's list was he says he's got a personal Stephen Hawking story, and of course, and I bet it wasn't hiking, by the way. So, no. So tell me your personal Stephen Hawking story. Well, obviously, I live in the village just outside Cambridge, and I go to Cambridge quite a bit. And he obviously is based in, or was, he's dead now, but he was based in Cambridge. And you would see him in the town in his wheelchair, and most Saturdays I would walk into Cambridge because it's exercise and go shopping and stuff. And there are certain ways I can go in, and one particular way I can go in meets a bit of Cambridge that's called the Backs, which tourists would know what the Backs were, but it's the back of the colleges. And there are pedestrian crossings to get over a road. And I was walking along, and I could see a wheelchair user way ahead of me, And I thought, well, that's quite a wheelchair. Maybe I wonder if that's Stephen Hawking. And as I got closer, I realised it was, but there was no nurse with him. Normally he had a nurse with him, and there was no nurse. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to come up to a pedestrian crossing. He won't be able to press the button. So I increased my speed, got up to him, and he was there, stopped by the road, and I was there by the button you press to make the traffic lights work. So I pressed the button, and he said, "Thank you." And so, so I looked at him and I smiled, and forever I can still hear that "thank you" every time I get to that particular crossing.
Oh my God, that's spooky!
It is so funny. It's a minor thing, but he was so nice about it, and the lights went, and I made sure he got across, and then off I went on my way, and he went off on his way. But
that is awesome.
It was quite funny. It was for me. It was quite funny. It probably wasn't for him, but I found it.
Well, I'm
very
disappointed
funny.
it wasn't a Stephen Hawking hiking story, but yeah, I can see how that might have been a bit tricky.
Yeah.
Okay, man. Well, look. Yeah. Once again, thanks for telling us that.
No problem.
Okay. Cheers. Now that is a particularly British sense of humour, so please don't be offended by it. But I could imagine that disembodied voice as he told me, and I cracked up as quietly as I could. Before we chat with Andrew, let's thank those of you who think enough about the show to support it. This week, I want to thank recurring donors Jeffrey Braden, Gail Posey, Todd Withrow and Suzanne Johnson. Your support is both needed and deeply appreciated. If you'd like to help out, then click on one of the donate buttons at the hikingradionetwork.com website, where you can show your appreciation. I thank you for it. Now the TGO Challenge and my friend Andrew Cohen. Here's Andrew. Our guest on today is Andrew Cohen, a buddy of mine who I met on the TSX Challenge. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Good, I'm doing fine. Yourself?
I'm very good, thanks. And let's start with the TSX Challenge, actually. Were you aware, before you did that, about the X in TSX? Because I think that's the thing I overlook more than anything else, the extreme.
Not as much as I found out, obviously, once we went. Even Mount Whitney, that was not even, I mean, I knew by looking at the itinerary that it was, but I had to look it up. I wasn't aware of Mount Whitney, how high it was, how strenuous it was, things like that. The idea of just hiking out west and the challenge of the journey was what drew me to it. Obviously, I was listening to Chris on one of your podcasts.
Sure.
And while I was hiking, actually, in Alabama, and it just sounded great. So when I get back, I reached out to their company, and I got a call back from one of their guides. It wasn't
Nice.
Chris; it was actually someone else.
Sure.
And they just made it sound so good. And I said, you know what? It very uncharacteristic for me. I signed up pretty much that day and committed to going. Pretty much almost, probably at that point, it was probably 11 months out.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a wonderful experience, wasn't it? I mean, just,
Yes, it was great.
I know I was listening to the show before, and I don't want to bore people with it, but, I think it was the biggest surprise to me was that it was a guided tour that I felt a part of a team more than I think I felt part of a team for that hike more than I felt part of a team since I was a kid at school playing soccer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a real part of a team thing. I absolutely loved. It was great. Anyway, that isn't what you're here to talk about.
No.
What you're here to talk about is another trail that people may be interested in, and it's kind of make it up as you go along kind of trail in many ways, isn't it? So
Tell us, it's not a trail; it's more an event.
Tell us about the TGO Challenge.
Okay, the TGO Challenge, which stands for the Great Outdoors Challenge, is a coast-to-coast hike in Scotland. So you go from the west coast to the east coast. The unique thing about it is it's obviously there's other people taking place in this event. So, and I say it's more an event because it's really not a fixed trail. You actually pick your route, which is, to me, mind-blowing. It's unique in hiking that you make your own trail. So there's 500 people, that's usually what it's limited or capped at, that are doing this event, and they're all starting and ending at different places. But a lot of you are going to have a lot of commonality among your routes because there are some points where you're kind of funneled in due to the geographical areas where it's more passable, or there's services or things like that. So there's people that may be doing the exact same route as you, but most likely it's not. You're going to just kind of drift in and out of different people. And what was amazing to me is that, it's not a race. Nobody wins an award for being the first one or the last one. You all get, as they say, the same T-shirt. I actually didn't even know there was actually a real T-shirt involved, but there is. You all get the same T-shirt. So there's no race. So there's no, unless you want to hurry for yourself, there's no reason to, hurry it out. It's like the AT or anything else. You all finish when you finish, and if you're the first person or the last person that year, there's no difference. You all did the hike.
You all get the T-shirt, yeah. Which is the important bit.
Yes. You get your moment. You get to finish, and it's obviously your route can be harder or easier or shorter or longer based on the route you pick. But you're going to meet people along the way, and what amazed me is that there were people from all over the world.
Sure. That
I interacted with.
How did you hear about it in the first place?
Probably going down a rabbit hole on the internet, searching for hikes.
The internet has got a lot to answer for, hasn't it?
It is, but it actually, I never would have heard of this without it, because obviously it's a UK thing. I live in the United States, and I had never really heard of this event before. But the moment I heard it, I felt like this is the idea of obviously going to Scotland, beautiful territory, beautiful views. It's, obviously an exotic location compared to where I am, I feel. And then
Scotland has never been called an exotic location.
Well, it's very different. I thought it was unique. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I would love to go back. I will go back hopefully someday. I just don't know when yet. I'd love to do more hiking there. But the fact that you made up your own trail, so you could go hit mountains if you want to. You could stay more in the lowlands. You can travel across, boggy marshes, or just stay on roads.
So what happens then? Do you choose before you go where you're going to go between, or do they just give you two town names and you can go from that town to that town?
You have a couple of choices on where to start with. There's I think there's 14 places now that you can check out from. So
you start on the west. You start on the west coast, right?
So everybody's starting from one of these locations.
Right.
You sign out. You go there in the morning on the day that you're scheduled to start. You sign out on your roster and you go. You start hiking, but you have to submit your route in advance. So basically, when we were on the TSX, I had made the decision that this was the year I was going to apply, and I actually applied in September when we came back. Unfortunately, it was delayed due to the passing of the Queen. So they delayed the opening of the applications because it was in September. So I applied, and luckily I got a position. I guess less people had applied that year. COVID was still up in the air. We didn't know if there were some restrictions from some places. So I think people that were applying was low. It was below 500. So I got a spot, basically.
So 500 people go every year.
It's capped at 500, yes.
So once you got your start point, did you know where you were heading to, or do you literally just have your start point and head and say, I'm going to go to Aberdeen's on the East Coast, say Aberdeen, wherever it is.
Yes. Well, that's where I went.
And it's up to you. Oh, really? So it's up to you entirely which route you take to get to Aberdeen.
Correct. Yes, you give them a very detailed route. In other words, what your plan is each day, where you're going to start, where you're going to end, the route you're taking to get there. So you're submitting grid points, obviously, along the way, using the OS maps, which for American users would be foreign, but obviously you're giving them the grid points of where you're going to be and how you're going to do it. So you don't tell them I'm just starting and then here. You tell them the route you're taking. The reason is that if you're going to go over a mountain, or Monroe as they call it, or you're going over someplace that might have bad weather, they want to know that, and you have to give them an alternative. So more or less, it's a very detailed route. So this is the most detailed map plan I've ever made for a hike. I had to plan out, all my days, every day, where I was going, where I was going to end up, and how I was going to get there, and each day along the whole route. And everybody's doing the same thing. And then you submit it to them, and they actually vet it. So they have other hikers that review your route, decide based on some of what you've told them before and the reality of knowing the route. They're most knowledgeable and experienced. And they make some suggestions on how you can tweak it. Like maybe they may know that a certain road now is no longer passable. Like in my case, they sent me, hey, you might want to go to this route, go over this bridge because the bridge you picked is gone because it was washed out last winter. I have no way of knowing that. And a lot of the resources on the internet that I was using are, hiking in Scotland, but they're out of date. No one's updating them. It's not like I have a gut hook map or something that I can use, or far out or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's basically I'm looking at maps and just picking a route.
So how many days did you allow yourself, and did you build in 0 days for that as well? I mean, and how long did it take?
Yeah, I didn't pick any 0 days. I originally put you have up to 2 weeks, 13 days, I think, to actually finish the challenge, or 14 days, I forget. That's the maximum you can take to cross. So depending on your route, you might need more of that. I actually finished. I actually gave myself 13 days, and I finished in 12. I actually did a longer stretch, 2 days. Naturally, I have a problem. And
you do. I know. I fight with you.
I'm my own worst enemy. So, and I did a little bit further walking one day to end later, and I started and did a longer day, 2 days in a row. So I cut out one day on my trip. I ended up finishing a day early, and my route it came out to just about 200 miles exactly that I walked.
Wow, that's quite substantial.
In about 12 or 13 days. So, but no 0 days, but a lot of days. It seemed like I got to say, it's the best hike I've ever been on in my life. I felt like a thru hiker. I felt accomplished. I definitely had that feeling of there was a fire and intensity inside me to finish this. I never thought once, what am I doing out here? Why am I out here? Which every other hike, I always wonder, why am I out here? What am I doing? A couple of times a day, you're thinking like, what am I doing this for? And I just enjoyed everything about that hike. It was just great.
Was it sociable for you?
Not as much as I would have. I think ideally, I'm probably more a loner in the sense of, I hike solo a lot. But I like the nighttime, that people come together.
Sure.
So that part I would like a little bit. I thought it would have been more social. People were a little stand in certain towns. You're a foreigner, obviously. You come into a town. Some of these places are not very, there's not a lot of people there. And, they look at you. People ask what you're doing. They can tell I'm obviously not from there. Once I open my mouth,
surely not.
Yeah. So, but they were very friendly. I did have people buy me drinks along the way. I tried going to a couple of pubs, but that's not really what I do. And a lot of times I'd go to a caravan park, an RV park, in essence, or a campground for people that don't know what a caravan park would be there. And you would kind of stuff that, and that's mostly families or couples. So it's not like there's a lot of. I ran into other hikers on the challenge, and we would usually end up talking a little bit, but. You're kind of, as you would say, knackered from walking all day, and you're tired.
Learn the language.
Yeah. So, so a lot of times you basically just get in. Same thing like here. You do your things you got to do, take care of yourself, do some hygiene, eat, and then you're going to sleep because you're waking up and doing it again the next day.
Did you camp all the way, or did you stay in hostels or bed and breakfast? Because some of the breakfasts at some of these Scottish places are magnificent.
Yes, they are. I did a little bit of everything. You're expected to wild camp, as they say sometimes, which I did do a couple of days of that. But I stayed at caravan parks, which are, you have a green, a pitch, or a campground that you can stay at, and that's a little bit more serviceable because there's usually a bathroom, water, and electricity. And then I also stayed at a hostel one day, and I stayed at a bed and breakfast another day. So I had a wide range of things. I basically didn't stay in hotels, though, until I got to Aberdeen. Or in the beginning, I stayed at a bed and breakfast for 3 days before I started. So
and how accessible is it to get off? Because, if, God forbid, you got injured, and are you ever far from a road where so you can get off?
It depends on your route. When I was in the Highlands, I felt I was kind of remote. I'm sure they would have had probably... At certain places, there were roads. There were Forest Service roads, kind of like you would be here. I may have been 5 or 10 miles from like a city or a town. Other times, you're walking along, a highway. So I think it's just like any place else hiking. It just depends on the route you pick. That was the route I picked. Obviously, people could have chosen a more remote route or a more, going along roads or closer to town. So you pick your own route.
And what brought about your choices? Why did you choose the route you chose?
A lot of them were logistically, just where I was heading. I wasn't sure how I was going to be. You hear about the Highlands and how they're ominous, just like, you're not sure. And I didn't know how it would be after walking for 10 or 12 days. So in the end, I picked basically a former rail that is now a trail. And that was very easy. and it was kind of a good way to end. But it was 40 miles of just walking on a more or less groomed path. There was some parts that weren't as well maintained, but it was a marked, easy to follow path, like where you here in the States following a trail. I mean, I don't think you get lost unless you really tried hard. The beginning in the highlands, I was following some trails that were, worn path in the ground, but not so well traveled and kind of remote. I'm sure if something happened out there, I would have had a call for rescue or someone to come get me. After that, it was kind of like a mix. I was sometimes on forest roads, sometimes on gravel. Sometimes you were walking on the side of an actual paved road or a dirt road in a rural community. And there's a couple of times where I was basically off on a muddy path and bushwhacking, and I was like thinking, like, how do people walk here? There's no path, So, but it was good. I got to say, it was probably one of my greatest hiking experiences I've had, on par with the TSX. So,
that is some praise indeed.
Yeah,
now,
it was very good.
Since I've known you, Andrew, I know how not committed you are, but how much you love hiking. You really love it. And in fact, Andrew's has got a t-shirt on right now that says, "Yes, I do have a retirement plan. I plan to go hiking," which you actually do. So tell us what you're doing next month.
Next month in February, the big thing is the AT. I've talked about doing the AT probably about 14, 15 years now. I love the idea of doing it, but we have discussed this in the past. Yes. I have trouble taking myself out of my life for 5 or 6 months. I think it's an incredibly selfish thing to do, which I believe it is. At the same time,
hang on. One of our guests a few months ago really made me think about that in a different way. I've always said it's selfish, and frankly, I still think it's selfish. However, he said it's self-care, which kind of is not a bad thing. You've done a full career in that you've just retired from. Right. Was it in law enforcement, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you've done a full career in law enforcement, and so you deserve a rest, for God's sake, and you want to do this thing. And he said, treat it as self-care. If you start looking at it that way, you'll feel a whole lot less bad about it.
I agree. I think it does make you a better person. Obviously, there's something that I get out of going out there and hiking. Beside the physical challenge and the physicality, being in nature, there's numerous studies that show being in nature helps people. There's a reason why there's parks in towns and people want them. But it also, I'm leaving my family. I'm married. I have children, grandchildren now. So
how old are your children?
Most of them are grown. My youngest one is 17. But you're still leaving the care of the house and everything else going on. Life goes on when you're out on the trail. Things break down. People get hurt. People get sick. Things like that. And you're not there to do anything about it. You're not able to help. And I find that very hard to do, especially now. I think it's easier to keep in touch. I mean, obviously, you can phone home from your hand. You're carrying a phone, and you can even get video call and see things, which is a good and bad thing, because then you can hear everything that's going on. Whereas before, years ago, you'd probably not even know stuff was bad until maybe later on, and you wouldn't distract yourself from your hike.
Sure.
I don't know if I'm a long distance hiker like that. I love the idea of doing it, but I don't know if that's really for me psychologically or just physically able to do that. I think I'm more a longer term, multi-day, maybe multi-week. I could see going like we did the TSX, or even this 2-3 weeks, maybe a month or so, and then coming home. So,
Andrew, you step out there for 1 month, my friend. You're going to want to stay there, and you know what, we've talked about this before, as you said. You're a good man for thinking that way, and I'm sure that's the right thing for many people to think. But if you've got the blessing, not permission, but
yes, I understand.
You know what I mean? The blessing from home, which I believe you have.
Yes, I do.
You never get another chance, my friend.
Or maybe I retired this year was to do that.
Maybe you will get another chance, but you might not get another chance. So think about it, because what I'm going to say to you is, if you do go out there, and I'm going to be hiking in the UK myself, but I'll be back in June, and so if you're still on the trail, I'm definitely going to want to catch up with you to make sure that we push you through to the end.
Well, my plan is to start. I'm starting in February. It's cold. I'd much rather hike in cold weather than hot. I'll enjoy that. I think I'm prepared. I think I'll do it. I'm leaving my options open. Recently, the last couple of days, I went out on the Pinhoti again in October, and I actually injured myself from doing what I normally do, which is too much too soon. And so I'm leaving it open. I'm gonna start hiking, but I'm leaving it open to say whether I'm going to do a through hike or not. My plan was to do a through hike originally, but I've since
Talk yourself out of it. Talk yourself out of it.
Yeah, probably. And I'm just going to go. I'm not putting the pressure on myself, I think, to do a through hike, but I'm also not saying I can't.
Okay.
But if I want to come home after a little bit, I'll come home. I'll see how I'm doing. Obviously, been recovering from that injury.
Sure.
I damaged a tendon in my knee on my it's a quad. Just started again walking with weights. But everything's flat here in the South Florida area. So the tallest mountain I have is actually nearby, and it used to be a garbage dump that they turned into a park.
Nice.
And it's only about 70 feet tall. So I can go up and down that all day long. It's still not going to compare to Georgia or anywhere else.
Listen, my friend, I've known you a couple of years now, and I think that you've wanted to do this, and I hope you do it, because it's I'll take a great deal of joy in speaking to you after Katahdin. But look, I'm so glad you came and tell us about this hike. I think Ryan, our friend Ryan, who looked after the show for a while, did the TGO challenge or tried to do the TGO challenge. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. Yeah,
and I would encourage anyone that it's a magnificent thing. You'll meet people from all over that are just interested in hiking. And doing the same thing. I met people from all over Germany, Japan. There was several people from obviously Europe, and a lot of people from the UK, obviously, and several other Americans as well.
I'll put a link in the show notes of the TGO challenge, and if anybody's interested in doing it, and they can click on that and see what's what.
Yeah, it's in May every year, so it might be closed already for this year, but keep in mind in September it opens up again. And I'm looking forward to possibly 2025 and going back and doing it.
Good for you. Okay, man. Take it easy, okay? We'll catch up soon.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye. Sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? I think I'm right in that Ryan Hopkins applied to do the TGO challenge a couple of years ago, but I know he was turned down once, but he may have applied again. I'm not sure if he actually did it, but I love the idea of planning your route, then pretty much going on your own merry way. And since Andrew and I recorded that, he's let me know that he sets out on the approach trail at Amicalola Falls this coming Sunday, and will be starting the AT from the top of Springer on Monday. I hope he gets into it and he doesn't go home. No offence to his wife, of course. And with a bit of luck, I'll reconnect with him when I get home from England, sometime in June. So that's the show, with a Brit who came over here last year and an American who headed in the opposite direction. As we've learned before, it's all about the journey. I'll see you next week.